Hello everyone, welcome to NADME. My name is Vasu. In this video, we will discuss Chapter 1 of Class 6th History NCERT. What, where, how and when. As we know, history is about the events of the past. So, how do we find what happened in the past? For finding out about events that happened few days back, we can listen to radio, watch television or read newspaper. For events of last year, we can ask someone who remembers. But what about things that happened long back? We will see in this chapter how it can be done. First, we have to think what can we know about the past. Things like what people ate, the kind of clothes they wore, and the houses in which they lived. We can also know about the lives of hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, artists, and scientists. There were so many places where people lived in the past. Like for thousands of years, people lived along the bank of Narmada River. Some of the earliest people who lived here were skilled gatherers, that is, people who gathered their food. They knew about the vast wealth of plants in surrounding forests and collected roots, fruits and other forest produce for their food and also hunted animals. This is a map of South Asia which includes India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan and Sri Lanka. South Asia is called a subcontinent as it is separated from the rest of the Asia by seas, hills and mountains, and it forms a separate geographical entity. Coming to northwestern part of today's India, we find Suliman and Kirtar hills. About 8,000 years ago, women and men first began to grow crops like wheat and barley here. Here people also began rearing animals like sheep, goat, cattle and started living in villages. Next, we find Garo hills in northeast and Vindhyas in central India. These are the areas where agriculture developed. Rice was first grown in the north of the Vindhyas. Now let's see River Indus and its tributaries. Some of the earliest cities flourished on these rivers about 4700 years ago. Here in Ganga Valley, many cities developed 2500 years ago. Area along the south of Ganga was known as Magadha during ancient times, which now lie in Bihar. Its rulers were very powerful and set up a large kingdom. Kingdoms were set up in other parts of the country as well. Despite hills and high mountains, deserts and rivers, people traveled from one part of the subcontinent to another. Men and women traveled in search of their livelihood, as also to escape from natural disasters like floods and droughts. Sometimes men marched in armies conquering others' lands. Besides, merchants traveled with caravans or ships carrying goods from place to place. Religious teachers walked from village to village, stopping to offer instructions and advice on the way. Finally, some people perhaps traveled driven by the spirit of adventure, wanting to discover new and exciting places. All these led to sharing of ideas between people and enriched our cultural traditions. Two words we often use for our country are India and Bharat. The word India comes from the Indus called Sindhu in Sanskrit. 2500 years ago, when Iranians and Greeks came through the northwest, they called Indus as Hindos or Indos, and the land to the east of the river was called India. The name Bharata is mentioned in the Rig Veda. The earliest Sanskrit composition dated to about 3500 years ago. Word Bharata was used for the group of people who lived in the northwest. Later it was used for the country. There are several ways of finding out about the past. One is to search and read books that were written long ago. These are called manuscripts and were written by hand. These were written on palm leaf or specially prepared bark of a tree known as birch. Over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away by insects, some were destroyed, but many have survived, often preserved in temples and monasteries. These books dealt with all kinds of subjects like religious beliefs and practices, lives of the kings, medicines and science. Besides, there were also epics and poems and plays. Many of them were written in Sanskrit, others were in Prakrit, which was the language of the common people, and also in Tamil. We can also study inscriptions. These are writings on relatively hard surfaces, such as stone or metal. Sometimes kings got their orders inscribed so that people could see, read, and obey. Also, kings often kept records of their victories in battles. This inscription was found in Kandahar, which is situated in present day Afghanistan and dates back to about 2250 years ago. It was inscribed on the order of Ashoka. We will read about him in chapter 8. There were many other things that were made and used in the past. Those who study these objects are called archaeologists. They study the remains of buildings made of stone and brick, painting and sculpture. They also explore and excavate to find tools, weapons, pots, pens, ornaments, and coins. Some of these objects may be made of stone, others were of bone, baked clay, or metal. Objects that are made of hard, imperishable substances usually survive for a long time. Archaeologists also look for bones of animals, birds, and fish to find out what people ate in the past. Plant remains survive far more rarely. Historians are the scholars who study the past. They often use the word source to refer to the information found from manuscripts, inscriptions, and archaeology. Historians and archaeologists, in a way, are like detectives who use all these sources like clues to find out about our past. This is a pot from an old city. Pots like these were used about 4700 years ago. On the right, these are old silver coins. Coins such as this one were in use from about 2500 years ago. We usually mention date as day, month and year. For example, 1st January 2020. These years are counted from the date generally assigned to the birth of Jesus Christ. All dates before the birth of Christ are counted backwards and usually have the letters BC added on. BC stands for before Christ. We sometimes find AD before dates. AD stands for Anno Domini, which means in the year of the Lord, that is Christ. CE and BC are also used instead of AD and BC. The letters CE stand for Common Era and BCE stands for Before Common Era. We use these terms because the Christian era is now used in most of the countries in the world. In India, we began using this form of dating from about 200 years ago. Also, sometimes the letter BP, that is before present, is used. Some important dates to remember from this chapter are 6000 BC, that is 8000 years ago, which is the beginning of agriculture in the subcontinent. Around 2700 BC, that is 4700 years ago, first cities on the bank of Indus. And 500 BC, that is 2500 years ago, was the time when cities in the Ganga Valley and a big kingdom, Magda, were prospered. That's it for today, guys. Let's revise what we have learned in this chapter. We studied things that we can know about the past, places where people lived like on the banks of Narmada, Suleiman and Kirtar Hills, Garo Hills and Vindhyas. Also, we have seen people lived on the banks of Indus and Ganga and their tributaries. We saw the people who traveled and why they traveled, words which we often use for our country, that is India and Bharat, about manuscripts, inscriptions, archaeologists and historians. At last we saw what do dates mean and for what BC AD and BC BCE stands for. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And in the next video, we will discuss second chapter on the trail of the earliest people. Check the link of the video in description and I will see you in the next video.